Deep breath.
It's nothing. It's just the internet.
Yeah, I know. So, Alex, welcome to your YouTube channel. Thanks for being on today.
It's been a minute. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to start by telling the fine people of the internet what we've been up to this season, why the channel's been quiet?
In a couple words, adulting, life, new jobs, med school. But we have been getting after it. There will be a bunch of stuff coming out shortly. Ripper 2 Large, Supernova, maybe some stuff from Letman, maybe some more kind of life and channel changes coming up in the future to announce. But yeah, life goes on. The border's open. We're getting to Canada.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Well, the other reason we've been quiet is the training camp thing.
Right, we've been doing a ton of that.
A lot of teaching this season. So, but don't worry, we're having fun.
So do you want to explain to these good people what we're doing here today, why they're looking at a blank screen?
Yeah, so this is a video that I've kind of wanted to make for a while about how to navigate the significant other plus coaching relationship in Whitewater. So in our case, Alex, when we first started dating, was a much stronger paddler than I was. If you've been following the channel for a while, you've probably seen footage of me swimming out of a green Nomad at some point. I swim a lot less now, but
it was certainly a process getting there, I would say. And
yeah,
it certainly might have some value for us to talk about it.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about some of the things that we did either consciously or some of the things that we had known or thought of a little bit before we got into that to make the relationship smoother and to make the whole coaching thing kind of smoother. So the reason I really wanted to do this is because before I was dating Alex, I was dating a different whitewater boater. And the point of this is not to say nasty things about my exes. I want to make that really clear. But in that relationship, it just felt like there wasn't a whole lot of thought put into me as a beginner. He wanted to do a bunch of the things that he wanted to do. And he was like, well, I'll find a way to have her come and not die. But it didn't mean I wasn't taking horrendously awful swims that could have been avoided.
Yeah, and certainly I think having you as a part of my life and then a part of my river experience as well, I am now exposed to a lot more kind of open feedback of what other women's experiences have been on the river and kind of just more aware as well. And I thought that when you suggested this, it was really an opportunity for men in general to kind of look through the mirror and take a better look at themselves, who we are in our own community, and find ways where we can all do better.
Yeah, for sure. And I want to make clear, we're going to try to not generalize. So I want to use the term like stronger paddler and weaker paddler when we're talking specifically about those relationship dynamics, and just talk about like female male when that's applicable. But if we slip up, I'm sorry. Obviously, our experience is that the male was the stronger paddler and the female was the weaker one. But hopefully there's some girls out there teaching your dudes, or, you know.
Oh my God, I hope so.
Shout out to non-hetero relations too.
Yeah, I mean, whatever it could be. Certainly, we want to preface this as we are not perfect. I certainly am not.
Yeah.
So
let's start at the very beginning. Where would you say that I was as a paddler when you first met me 3 seasons ago?
So when we met, you swam out of class 4. And you were very uncomfortable in class 4. So you were coming down a trip I was leading where we were a mixed bag of class 5, class 4, and a class 3 or 2 boater. And you were definitely struggling that day on technical whitewater. But then on the Ottawa, where we later kind of caught up again, you were able to get through those lines, but maybe not super gracefully. I would say you had skills beyond where your mental game was.
Yeah, that's very true. When we first met, I was really struggling with the whole mental aspect of calculating risk and assuming risk, because that's really the definition of class 4, is that you're starting to assume some risk. We can talk about that a little later, but where would you say that 3 years later, almost to the day, I am now?
Right. So, yeah, we've known each other for longer than 3 years, but we're right around our 3-year anniversary as a couple. So today, you are running class 5 weekly. Not like wild class 5, but you are running class 5 weekly. You are comfortable in class 4 and class 4 plus, and you are eyeballing some pretty serious stuff. Stone Valley of the Raquette, some really pretty scary micro creaking for most people, I would say. And you also are a solid playboater, and you've really come a really long way. I would say in the last 8 months is where you've really shattered a lot of your boundaries. A lot of it was for us building kind of in a spiraling motion up on top of fundamentals, right? Taking each thing in its own place.
Yeah, and I do want to emphasize that it took me 3 years to get there. So one of the themes that I really want to put out into this is that you need to take the slow way. You need to be invested in the relationship for the long haul, both to like survive as a couple, but also to make the coaching thing work. Because obviously at that point, when I was still terrified of swimming class 4, it wouldn't have worked to just try to push me into class 5. So
no, but we were able to find ways where we could both enjoy the same runs. We specifically would target things where there was something for me and there was something for you, and we could both enjoy ourselves without you just like walking the make all day, right?
And we definitely had a lot of points where we made conscious decisions about where we were going to be. And sometimes that was based on water levels or my energy level. There were definitely days where it was like, I just want to float in the sunshine in class 2 in a silly slicey boat. And I don't want to work on anything. I don't want to hear about why my booth sucks. Like, I'm just here to chill. And there's other days where, you know, I had more energy or was feeling like getting after it. And those were the really good days where we could work on pushing.
Right. I would certainly say that one of the things that is the hardest is I am always just your biggest cheerleader and your biggest fan. And you know how much I respect everything that you do. So I really appreciate the fact that, you know, you understand that if I'm giving you advice, it is because I want you to get better for the sake of you getting better, right? I think that one of the things that worries me out there that is a pitfall for people would be pushing your partner to get better so that you can go and run other stuff. Like if that's the position that you're in, you really are probably destined for problems.
Yeah. So you just brought up 2 really good things, and I want to talk about both of them. So first, you were talking about feedback and like being critical. And I understand that that can be hard in a lot of whitewater relationships because you have to kind of compartmentalize. You're not criticizing me as a human. You're not criticizing anything in our relationship. It really is just this coaching thing. And I think it was kind of easy for me to put it in its own box because I was an athlete my entire childhood. And then I'm just like used to getting that kind of, not exactly criticism, but when sometimes someone doesn't word their feedback very carefully, it can feel a lot like criticism. And to just not have that gut reaction to see it for what it really is something that can be tough.
Yeah, it's just a minefield because if you don't have that ability to communicate, if you don't foster it, it's not going to come out of nowhere. You really have to build that trust and respect with each other to where you can say what you need to say. You know, if if I spend all day beating around the bush, we're not going to get anywhere. But at the same time, it really is important that I'm respecting your feelings, that we can continue forward in a linear motion. Because if I overstep, if I do something like that, I know that the next time that criticism isn't going to be well received, and probably the next 5 times at that.
And I think it's worth pointing out too that there's other styles that can work really well. So we're talking about you openly giving me feedback and criticism in front of other people, which can feel like a kind of public space. And I don't think it's unreasonable if someone in their relationship just needs to have their partner be their number one cheerleader, especially in public. Like, no negativity, no criticism. There are couples who, when they're on the water, it's full positivity. Even if someone crashes a line, it's like, you got this, baby. You're great. You're going to get it the next time. But they do, behind the scenes, kind of have those conversations about, okay, what went wrong? But it just happens when they go home. And in the case of the particular people I'm thinking about, they just wear their GoPros and they have them on all the time, in the boogie water, in class 2, in every single second that they're on the water. And that's what enables them to both have that feedback and also be each other's number one cheerleaders on the river.
And they have done that ritual in front of us as well. And they are celebrating their wins, but they're also deep diving on their crashes. Mm-hmm. And it definitely is a really interesting way of doing things, to be able to compartmentalize. It's fully objective. There's no hiding from camera. It's something that pro sport teams do. So it's also super effective, but it's a totally different deal. I don't think everyone will partake in.
So to transition to the other good point you made when we were talking earlier, obviously you have a little bit of visibility in the community and a little bit of a reputation as someone who is on the sendier side of life. Were you at any point concerned about taking a step back from your own progression to teach me, and if that was going to be an issue for you and how you worked through that?
Well, truthfully, we really benefited from the fact of natural circumstances. So COVID really restricted our ability to travel. It also happened to be a period of drought. So we were half slicing the moose and really using our local runs as classrooms to focus on what we were doing. We figured out how to communicate about your comfort level, figure out what you were going to target going into each run, what you were going to walk, and what I was going to do. And so by having that game plan going in, there was no awkwardness or negativity. And it really allowed us to work as a unit, even if we were on slightly different programs. That isn't possible everywhere, but we made the most of what we were working with at the time. What was good about that is we were both able to be on the same river together. That being said, I have not been on Stone Valley more than once or twice a season in the entire time that we've dated, whereas I used to be on all 10 or so releases of it, right? So yes, I have adjusted what my schedule is, what I usually push myself to, because frankly, that's not as important to me. I can run Stone Valley for my 100th time and that doesn't really matter to me. But getting you to the point where you get your first run down Stone Valley and it's clean and fun and smiles, that means the world to me. So that odyssey is worth skipping any number of releases.
Yeah, and once again, talking about taking the slow way around, it's not worth having me crash it and never want to go back, because then you're probably not going to go back as much either, right? So,
Selfishly speaking, yeah, that would be true. Yeah.
So, in addition to this theme of taking the slow route, the other thing that I feel like I really want to harp on and put out into the world is the idea of me being my own athlete and how we accomplished that. So, when we first started dating, I knew this other really great whitewater couple, and it had been a similar situation. Like, he was a really strong boater. She hadn't really done a whole lot of whitewater, and they utilized what I call the follow me method a lot. And I just heard a lot of gossip from other people around them, you know, how like she didn't have any of her own skills. She was just following him, how it was a super dangerous situation. And I don't know, there are probably situations where that is true, but I just didn't think it was cool for them to be tearing her down like that when she was out there putting in way more days than anyone else, way more committed. But I was terrified that people were going to say that about me, especially because when we first started dating was when your YouTube channel was first starting to get popular. And I never wanted anyone to see me as like your hang around. I wanted them to see me as my own sender who was on the river of my own merits. So what are your thoughts on the follow me method, and what were you actively thinking about so that I could stand on my own 2 feet as an athlete as you were coaching me?
I think that anyone who has been around for a while has seen that scenario play out a couple times, at least. It is effective at getting someone out with you, although it may not be actually effective at helping the person following you get better. It's something that is done inside, outside of relationships. People do it with their friends all the time, right? You see it everywhere. I think that regardless of this context, it is always inherently problematic. You have a leader who is looking over their shoulder the entire time, not focused on what they're doing, and you have a follower who's inherently over their head. I just don't subscribe to that, period.
That's not to say that we never use that, though. Like my first couple times down a rapid, or the ones that really scared me, there was some element of follow me, but I think we did a pretty good job of setting it up so that even if I was following you, I had scouted it so that I knew that, you know, if something crazy happened and you flipped in front of me, I still knew where I was going. I still knew what the plan was.
Absolutely. Following someone down a rapid you've never run before is a skill unto itself. Every paddler should have in their quiver, and it is part of the sport. And it can be one of the greatest part of the sports. I love taking people down certain things blind. But what I am specifically saying is that using that as a method to fast track someone through whitewater so that they can follow you down your runs, as opposed to you building them up to be ready for it as a fast tracking tool, is always going to be inherently problematic. If you are having someone follow down something that you know they can run, there's nothing wrong with that. But a lot of times in these relationships, you see something a little more nefarious.
Yeah. So to anyone listening, try to wean yourself off of following. That's, I think, one of the best things to making sure that you can stand on your own feet.
And it really leads to something super cool too. We see each other a lot, you know? So when we're out on the river and we're seeing all of our friends and all of that, we're not two people in a 3-boat eddy getting to talk to one person. We're on opposite ends of the crew, catching up with people. We're riding home, asking each other, oh, did you hear and so is doing this, that, and the other thing. It makes it much more of a like cocktail party vibe on the river for us, where we get to see and find out so much more about our friends' lives than we would if we were attached by an invisible string.
Mm-hmm. So to pivot a little bit, to what extent do you think that our off-water dynamic is influenced by our on-water dynamic and vice versa?
Well, obviously they get linked. If we're having a stressful week off river, both as individuals or as a couple, it's going to maybe come on river. And I think that is totally fine and normal. And hopefully the river brings you peace, right? But it is inherently going to happen that something on the river that's negative is going to come home with you and be, at the kitchen table.
So if you could give someone who's thinking about starting this significant other and whitewater coach journey, if you could give them one piece of advice, what would that be?
Don't. No. I would certainly say that if we have learned anything, it is a game of patience. For my part, with my exes who I tried to start in boating, I certainly was a catastrophic and miserable failure for any number of reasons. I'm sure they would love to tell you. But I think that if you're, with the right person, with the right mentality, you can make anything work. It is going to take a lot of listening. I think one of the biggest things that we kind of skipped over is the time and place of things. The fact that there are going to be so many moments where I'm going to want to give you a pointer and you have to be able to look at me and say, not right now. And I have to listen. And that's especially difficult. Again, like you kind of alluded to, this is going to happen in public, for at least the way that we do things. And we've had our friends comment to us wow, that was something,
when we finally got it right after 3 years.
Right. Like right now you're working on ear dipping on a like kind of perfect little class 2.5 foot booth. And to me, it's just like, send this. It's easy. It's simple. It's textbook. But there are definitely days where you dig it and you're on it. And there are days where you just look at me and go, I'm not doing that right now. And I have to be amiable to both options, right? And not push you if you're on the fence.
Yeah. If you had to pick one thing that's like the biggest thing that you learned from teaching me, just as a general teacher, what would you say?
I'm sure my answer would change almost daily. But I think that I have learned more about how to explain what we're about to do, because there are days where you want a lot of beta. There are days where you want almost no beta. And I have more weight in my words in your ears than someone else might. So sometimes I will just say something in passing. Typically, it's like after we already described the river, we're like rolling to a lip, and I'll be like, oh yeah, there's a thing on the left. And just like whatever head game, whatever safe space that you had in there where you thought you knew where you're going, just blows apart. And I can see that you want to murder me. So I've definitely learned to choose my words more wisely when I describe things, and be more strategic in how I approach prepping someone for going down a rapid.
Yeah, and different people have different styles of what they like too. So it helps you work like individually with different students. But I wanted to come back to the example you gave of the last minute over the shoulder comment as we're floating past the lip. That for me is like kind of a direct trauma response to how aggressively I was sandbagged in my previous relationship. We would scout the rapid, would look at it. I would stare at it for entirely too long, shaking in my boots. He would be like, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. And then he would be like, you know the plan, you're going to follow me. And then last minute, he would go somewhere completely different than what we had discussed. And I would end up floating into some hole sideways because I had no idea what was going on anymore. And that's why that was tough. So do you have any other words to offer on sandbagging, when it's cool, what it is, all of that?
Well, definitely two things. So that's a great example of why I'm not a fan of the follow me thing. I want to be able to take my own lines. I want to be able to say, hey, you go over there, I'm doing the hard one, right? That's how we coexist so well at different levels. So that is something into itself to work on. But then, yeah, as for sandbagging in general, certainly one of the things that you have an amazing ability to build on the river that you do not get somewhere else, but that can also shatter every aspect of your relationship, is the trust that you build, right? So the first time that I took you down Sureform, it was totally within your level. It was the top of your level, and it was, as someone who's used to deep water boating, a big bouncy slide. So I knew that it was something where if we looked at it, you would walk it for months, and it would have ripples and setbacks in other places. And I wanted you to just get over it and get through it, because I knew you'd be completely fine. Told you to follow me, lied to you, said you couldn't scout. There was nowhere good to scout. And bing, bang, boom, we're at the bottom, all smiles. You couldn't believe that what you had accomplished. Short-term gain, right? Ran that the rest of the summer. Skip ahead, a couple months later, we're running down with one of our friends who says, I'm going to step out real quick and scout it just because at this level, the entrance, I want to see it. You turned around to someone who's been paddling the Moose for nigh on a decade and said, you can't scout Sureform. Repeating what you had been told for the last 4 months. And that bell took, a year to unring when you found out that I had done that to you. So the number of setbacks, the number of things where you didn't trust me because you knew that I had lied to you, even though you understood why I did it, and it was for a quote unquote good reason, the long-term implications were not worth it. And it's something that I now don't consider in any way when we're looking at a rapid or talking about something.
Mm-hmm. One thing that I really wanted to address that I don't know if you have any experience with or can comment on is whitewater breakups. So in my previous relationship, we had a pretty good crew of, the same people would always boat together. And when we broke up, it obviously caused issues because suddenly two people were not on great terms. People had to pick sides, it got a little ugly. And at that point, as the weaker paddler, I almost fell out of paddling because he was the one who had gotten me into the sport and I didn't know anyone else I could go with. And everyone else was kind of taking his side because they were like, well, he's more at my level, you're cool and all, but I don't really want to boat class 2-3. I can go boat class 4-5 with him. And I have to say that the coolest thing that one of my friends did, and I appreciate the heck out of him to this day for doing it, was he said, I'm going to be honest with you. You know, I really like you as a human being. We can still hang out, but I'm probably going to paddle with your ex a little more. But what I'm going to do is this weekend, we are going to the Ottawa, and I'm going to call every single person I know who is roughly at your level, and you're going to make friends. You're going to get everyone's phone numbers. You're going to be on your social A game, and you're going to find yourself a new crew because I like your passion. I think you've got what it takes, you know, keep boating. And I just want to have said that because if you find yourself in a situation like that, it would go a long way to keeping some of those weaker paddlers and especially females in Whitewater, because I think we need more females in Whitewater, personally.
Yeah, super cool of that person. I certainly appreciate him to this day as well. I have not had that experience. I absolutely hope I never have that experience. I would say, as someone who has been in the community a long time and seen it gone down a few times, that it is not your role to take sides either. If you're a third party, you know, this is a small community. There are so few of us in this world that do paddle. It should be looked at as a tragedy every time somebody falls out for a completely avoidable reason. We're going to lose people to kids and jobs and travel and who knows what else. But to lose them for a completely avoidable reason, you know, these are friendships you don't just find lately. So what I would say from my experience of being a third party to my friends breaking up is that going above and beyond, trying to be that person that bridges both sides, that makes it okay for everybody to continue to exist and coexist, is not easy, but it will be appreciated long term, and you get to keep your friends instead of choosing between them. So if you find yourself in that position, please do. And certainly if you find someone who is in the position that Hannah was in, please do your part to make sure that our community stays strong. We just actually today bumped into a whole slew of people, and I commented, you know, it's super cool that, like, I know that a bunch of these people got into paddling because of someone they don't date anymore, and they all are still here paddling today. And that is rare, and it's super cool.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about that we haven't touched on or covered yet?
Man, I don't know. There's a reason that in all of my time in the boating community, I have never heard anyone talking publicly about their relationship in paddling. It's very nerve-wracking and uncomfortable. So at this time, I don't know, but I would just say that we are two unique individuals. We are just here trying to make it easier for somebody else or help somebody who really wants their significant other to start boating. There are many out there who are in that predicament and don't know how to make it happen. I would just say from my past failures, there's no replacement for respect, honesty, and openness. It has to just be a safe place to fail. You have to be able to fail in front of each other. And play boating, because of that, is a really great place to start as opposed to river running, because any great play boater who you're watching session has clearly mastered the art of failing in front of people. And it's also a low consequence environment where you are going to get your roll down. So I would really consider looking at that way, as opposed to trying to get your partner out creeking with you right off the hop. Because of that, also full slices and half slices are beautiful things. And definitely, I think that one of the other mistakes that people make is jamming their partner into gear that's obviously wrong for them. If I try to cram Hannah into one of my large creek boats with like a little extra padding in it and some old raggedy gear, we're starting for failure, right? You have your own gear, you're invested in, you've named some of your boats, right? I think that is a huge part of why you have been successful.
Mm. It's actually interesting that you bring up the point about failure. That was something that I had wanted to talk about too. As the weaker paddler, and in most cases, I was usually the weakest of the whole crew, it could be really hard to push myself on days when it wasn't just Alex and I. But yeah, it can be tough to fail in front of other people. And as Alex alluded to, COVID was honestly really helpful because it made the group smaller. I didn't have to fail in front of huge crowds at festivals and have people make nasty comments about how I wasn't ready for it. It was just our really close friends.
Yeah. And by happenstance also, we had another couple that was almost fostering us. And, now here we are, years later, we're kind of fostering another couple, right? So those lessons learned, being able to talk to each other, get advice from each other on how to navigate those waters is also sort of helpful.
Mm-hmm. One more thing I wanted to say is that it's a completely realistic expectation that in the way your relationship works, you're never going to be able to teach your partner whitewater, and that's fine. We have friends who, were husband and wife for, I forget how long, forever, and he refuses to teach her anything about whitewater. He went to professionals, got her professional instruction, and now they're out there shredding together.
Yeah, and I've known a couple like that, and that's totally gone both ways. I can think about a female paddler who was competitive in freestyle, very talented in creeking, and ran in completely different crews than her partner.
Yeah.
Completely different because it just didn't work for them. They could go home and live together, loved each other to bits, but wanted separate spaces on the river, which is super cool.
That's fine. I mean, we spend an almost sickening amount of time together sometimes. So for some people, they might need that outlet.
Totally.
So to end on a light and funny note, were there ever any moments during our relationship when you thought, oh my God, I've messed up so bad. This is it. We're going to get to the takeout. She's going to leave me because of what just happened here.
110%. Definitely a couple. Definitely deserved most of them. Although sometimes you have crashed and you are beating yourself up so bad that I'm more or less ducking for cover to not just become a lightning rod. But that is definitely something that I bring up because everyone is going to experience that eventually. The funny story would be our second or third time down the Moose, we made it to McGilla, which is the last rapid. When it is in the summer and it's low, nothing on that shelf is running, and walking around it is pretty unpleasant. So the local trick is to throw and go, toss the boat, jump in after. Well, you barely understood how to bounce off rocks in a boat. So the idea that we were standing on a cliff, we were going to go cliff jumping, you don't like heights or water particularly. The whole thing was just a no-go. So I think I eventually coaxed you into jumping, and then I was trying to reduce the amount of swimming that you'd have to do by throwing your boat close to the eddy. Because I was trying to add like a twist and toss it to this eddy, I completely whiffed it. The boat went standing up on its stern, hit a rock midway down.
My precious axiom.
Which you were extremely sentimentally attached to. and I bent the stern of your Axiom to a 45-degree angle. Yeah, good look on me. But then, yeah, I was so convinced I was never going to see you again. I held onto your boat and convinced you that I would buff the whole thing out. And you just needed to come back to New York and hang out with me again so that I would have a chance to make up for it and put this whole thing behind us. So I didn't never see you again. And you went back home with a bent boat and told everyone what an idiot I was.
Yeah, you correctly identified the incident that I would have chosen for sure. I can't believe that con worked, but I didn't know how to fix my boat, so I'm glad he was a gentleman and decided he was going to do it for me.
Oh man, no other option.
All right, so there you have it. Thanks for bearing with us through this long discussion. I hope you learned something about relationships, about Whitewater life.
Yeah, and I mean, even if you're not in a relationship currently, I hope that there is something in here that you can learn in taking to just how you help people, how you coach and communicate on and off the river with just the people in your community.
Yeah, and just generally grow the sport through every avenue available.
Catch you later, guys.